On behalf of the Chancellor Search Committee at the University of Colorado, Denver, I welcome you to the open forum for Dr. Michelle Marks. My name is Dr. Stephanie Sancherico. I am a professor and Director of Graduate Programs in the Department of Mathematical and Statistical Sciences here at CU Denver, and I'm also a member of the Search Committee. I'm excited that you've all decided to join us for this conversation, and we look forward to a robust dialogue with Dr. Marks. Before we get started, just a note, yesterday, given the technological difficulties that we had, we did have to switch to a different format, and so we're using that same format here today for consistency, more technological problems notwithstanding. So, before we begin, I want to extend a special thanks to you for your participation as we host this discussion online. We know many of you were excited to meet each of the candidates in person, but given the recent developments with COVID-19, this avenue allows us to safely connect our wider campus community to each candidate and ensure that everyone is able to provide input on the selection of our next chancellor. So in terms of format, so prior to this forum, we solicited both general questions and questions specific to each candidate. Leaders from Faculty Assembly, Staff Council, and Student Government Association reviewed the questions that were submitted and identified those would be asked, and that's where we'll start today. Because we are not able to host this conversation in person, we took this additional step to ensure we ask of each candidate a series of questions that reflects the thoughts of our broader CU Denver community. One other thing to note is you will be able to submit questions through the chat feature in the Zoom web conference. Please feel free to submit those. We'll give you a little bit of a time warning before we move into that series of questions, but feel free to start submitting your questions as we go along. In the open forum, we will do our very best to get through as many questions as possible. Format, we will have 30 minutes for questions that were submitted in advance and were compiled by our shared governance. After that, we'll have 10 minutes to go through questions that were submitted to Zoom through the open forum. And again, make sure you're using that chat feature. When there are 2 remaining minutes, I will indicate that we have time for one more question, and we will move from there. In a moment, we have Dr. Marks on the line. We're going to ask her to give 5 to 7 minutes of an introduction to herself and to talk about the skills and experiences that she'll bring to CU Denver. Dr. Marks currently serves as Vice President for Academic Innovation and New Ventures at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. Now I'd like to warmly welcome Dr. Marks to introduce herself to the CU Denver community.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you all for being with me today. I too wish to have had the opportunity to meet you all in person, and this is definitely a moment of flexibility and agility for all of us. You know, as we all collectively are going through this unprecedented outbreak of COVID-19, my thoughts are with everybody whose well-being has or will be impacted in the Denver region. I understand that CU Denver has had its first case, as well as everybody around the world. It's certainly an incredibly challenging time, and it's a rapidly changing situation with a lot of uncertainty around the duration of how long this will last. What I do know is that we're all in this together, and at CU Denver and at my home institution and all institutions across America, I know that we are all being guided by the same North Star, which is safeguarding the health of our students and faculty and staff first, and working hard now, as you are this week, to ensure that students can complete their classes on using virtual methods. And many of us are working to maintain essential campus operations for students that are either still on or near campus and can't get home, or to ensure the continuity of education, and that we're all doing everything that we can within our power to slow the spread of this disease. And I think of these times of crisis they're real tests of resiliency, and from what I understand from talking with many of your colleagues over the last day and a half, as a campus and as a community, you all are doing just that. You are working hard together to support students and each other, and you're doing whatever is necessary to pull together as a campus. And I've come to understand, especially over the last 24 hours, that that is the spirit of CU Denver. And that's the kind of place that I'd like to belong to. Seems that the people are amazing. When I ask what the best thing is about the campus, everybody says the people, and then they say the diversity. So thank you all so much for taking time out of what I know is a busy day for you and what you're involved with to spend some time with me now. It feels a bit surreal for me to be doing this now, and I really appreciate your flexibility and involvement with this process. I'm very pleased to be considered for this role of Chancellor of CU Denver, and I see this institution as a jewel in the University of Colorado system. Maybe it's a jewel with a bit of polishing to do to become as visible and as appreciated for all that I think it's worth. CU Denver's secret sauce for me is, as an urban public institution, the only one in Colorado, and you're built around the foundational value of creating true opportunity for the talented many. And as we meet virtually here today in a global crisis, we see more than ever the need for new solutions that have wide-scale impact. And there are so many other challenges in the world that require new knowledge and strong leadership and diverse leadership and a more engaged society. And I believe firmly that institutions like CU Denver that are committed to creating more educated society and one that looks like the diversifying population is never more important to our national interest and also to our regional economic development and to the prosperity of more families. So what do I love the most about CU Denver? First, the fact that you guys are innovative and urban public research institutions that will never, ever abandon your core value of commitment to access and equity and inclusiveness. And I know that I want to be a part of that type of institution. I see several strategic advantages, certainly the location in Denver as a thriving city and region. And as populations all across America are urbanizing, it seems like it's the place to be. And everybody I talk to says Denver is a terrific place to live, which is a true advantage for recruitment of students and faculty and staff. And being urban gives you and your students access to employers and entrepreneurs, governments, nonprofits. It's a lot easier to integrate internships and other forms of experiential learning into the educational study plan. And there are also opportunities for partnership to support research and civic engagements that show up more in urban areas than not. Also, I see opportunities as a part of this region and the system to do more with educational partnerships by creating pathway programs with sister institutions, by putting programs online in a collaborative fashion. So I personally see many exciting opportunities for CU Denver.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for your kind words and your introduction. So I'm going to move into questions. So our first question, could you please share a formative experience in your career that helped to define your leadership style? What did you learn and take away from that experience?
Formative experience. Well, let me roll the years back. I spent the first half of my career as a full-time faculty member, and I led students on study abroads. I would take graduate students to different parts of the world. And one particular trip I remember was we took a group to Dubai. And imagine 30 students and myself. We were on the trip. The purpose of the course was to be studying international foreign investment in industries like tourism and housing, and that particular Dubai was experiencing a boom at that time. And imagine us standing there in the shadows of the Burj Khalifa, which is now the world's tallest building that was being built at that time. And as we were reading about the economy and about foreign investment approaches and the grand hope at that point that Dubai would become the tourism center of the world, we were thinking about strategies and looking at how they were doing that. But when we arrived, what we saw was Pakistanis in tin roof shanties in the parking lots. And what we saw was how the workers had poor safety and living conditions and how hot it was and how they weren't protected. And so as we learned, they were there because there was no work in Pakistan. And while on one hand it was easy to be critical of the worker standards, we also learned that they were able to send money home to their families and that that was their only option for doing so. So the dinner conversation that night was actually not at all on foreign investment in Dubai. It was all about the way to teach ethics and what is right and wrong, and the fact that it's not so black and white, and the fact that there's a very human component to everything. And experiencing this and learning and listening brought a lot of humility to our students and to myself. And that the lesson that there's not only one right way, and that you can't always figure things out from reading a textbook. And so for me, I always look back at that particular moment as transformative, because I saw the way students expanded and shifted their mindset from that form of experiential learning and became more empathetic. And by the way, it affected me in the same way. And that we were all more willing to understand that to be able to figure things out, you've got to know the context. In this case, the cultural context. And so for me, it impacted my career because I saw the transformative value of experiential learning. And I remember I went back to campus, and that was the moment that I emailed my CV to the provost at the time, who didn't know me. And I asked to get on a committee to help the university forward study abroad. And somehow in return, I ended up with a job. I became the first person at my university to oversee graduate education. And that was the beginning of my administrative career, which I've now been in for 11 years. But I will say that I never forget those moments of working with students and watching them shift and learn and grow. And I keep that in mind every day as we make more strategic and operational decisions around supporting an institution.
Oh, great, thank you for that. So next question, what do you see as the greatest challenge facing CU Denver, and how would you envision your experience and background has prepared you to overcome this challenge at CU Denver as our next chancellor?
I think at this point in CU Denver's evolution, and I think maybe my answer would have been different a few weeks ago, but clearly the primary challenge is a time when public financing of higher education has been decreasing and is not likely to make a big turnaround. And because CU Denver is mostly a tuition-driven institution, the question, and because of COVID-19 now, we will likely, all institutions will face even greater financial pressures and enrollment challenges. I think for CU Denver, the challenge is how to ensure that the institution can continue to grow and remain strong. And first and foremost, this will mean a laser-like focus on improving student success. I know that you guys have done some work on this already and had some success. I feel that this is so critical for students, and it is also a very good financial strategy for the institution. Second, I think there's a need to continue to strengthen the role of the institution and the brand of the institution regionally and beyond. I think I understand there's an enrollment management, a strategic enrollment management plan, and there's a need to execute that and be very thoughtful about new student markets with an eye towards thinking about graduate education, which I understand has been on the decline, and thinking about program portfolios that make sense for the institution. I have faced some of those very same challenges at my current institution. To reach new markets, I led efforts to put targeted programs online in high-quality ways to reach working professionals. We were experiencing a graduate enrollment decline, and after 2 years in market with online graduate programs, we now have 1,000 new students, and we've turned around a declining pattern of graduate enrollment. I also led a program I'm very proud of, the development and the launch of a program called Advance, which is a seamless pathway program that helps students move from the regional community college into four-year institution with no wasted credits and with extra student support, like coaches that actually move with the student. They start with it. They're coaching advisors that move with the students from community college to four-year institution, and we launched that a little over a year and a half ago. We now have 1,200 students, and we're growing. And these are examples of initiatives that I've led that have help to grow enrollments are also generating revenues and in line with the mission of the institution. I think these programs provide real value to students, and I believe that with some creativity, we together could find options to grow enrollment and continue to strengthen CU Denver.
Thank you. You've already anticipated the next question. I'm just, for consistency, going to ask it. Maybe there are some additional details you could provide.
Okay.
So our next question, what are some steps you have taken at your current institution to support student success, and how might they apply here at CU Denver? And again, I know you've addressed a little, but I will give you the chance to see if there's any other you'd like to add.
Sure. Well, let me speak more in detail about students that are already at CU Denver, and I think I'm speaking to the choir because I think people already understand this from what I know about you. But the success of students, it's important to recruit new students, and there enough we have to pay a lot of attention to that. But it's also the most important to take care of the students who are already here. And focusing on persistence and graduation rates as metrics is important, but really looking much more deeply at the proximal indicators of how students are doing, and being able to do more to intervene when it matters in real time. There are so many reasons that students drop out, and I would want to do more homework and ask more questions. I mean, we've experienced students that drop out because they can't afford school. Sometimes even the cost of a textbook can make the difference. Sometimes it's academic preparedness and in certain bottleneck classes where they need extra help. For others, they're hungry and they have to miss. Some students are literally making choices between buying course materials or eating dinner. And other students feel like they don't belong. They don't make friends, they transfer in and they feel like they don't find their groove. For many other students, especially at CU Denver as well as my home institution, work schedules, many students are working students, and the less predictable work schedules get in the way. Over the last 7 years at Mason, we have improved six-year graduation rates from 64% to 70%, which is really huge, and I'm really proud of that. There were many people that were involved. I was directly involved. Really, it was a whole university effort, but I played a significant role on several initiatives, and one in particular I'll speak to is called the Student Experience Redesign, and we started that several years ago. The goal was to provide a simplified, connected, accessible student support and service model for all students. We had the Mason Shuffle, which is students would go to admissions or financial aid or an advisor or different student activities offices, and they'd reach out to different folks who would help them, but the experience was a one-off experience. And so what we've now put in place is a student services center where students either virtually or in person can get up to 80% of their needs taken care of by one visit and one person. The second thing that we have changed is the advising model. We've switched to a holistic coaching advising model where every student is assigned a coach who's trained on both academic and non-academic needs. And this has required hiring more advisors. And three, we're in the middle of a major technology rollout. We're bringing in a CRM, which will have ultimately create a single technology backbone that connects all of the offices. This is I think we're at the front end of the technology rollout, and it's going to be a multi-year process, but the result will be a student-centered care approach, sort of equivalent to when you think of a patient-centered care approach that we now have using technology in the medical system.
Thank you. So moving a little bit of a gear here, what do you see as the promise and perils of the move to greatly expand online education?
The promise and the perils. This is an area that I have a great deal of experience in. I currently have led our move to online at my current institution. The promise, online education is the only area that we see enrollment growing in our nation. The number of students, the demand for online education, both at the undergraduate level and at the graduate level, is growing. And in all other sectors, it's declining. However, at the same time, the competition is growing, and where online used to be primarily in a market that for-profit universities covered, now we're seeing many nonprofit and public institutions develop programs, online programs at both graduate and undergraduate level. So the marketplace is getting a lot more crowded. It used to be when I was teaching that we would look at, in an MBA program, I was looking around and at our competition, and that competition at the time were all of the 8 programs that were in the Virginia, Washington, D.C. region, and now it's 500 programs because working adults can find high quality online experiences. So I think it's absolutely critical to find the right way to go about it. We started first with a graduate strategy because we were declining in graduate enrollment and knew that for our population we had to take high demand programs, and we found the expertise in the interest area within our faculty, and we built those programs first, and we now have 1,000 students online, and it's generating new enrollment and also new revenue that we can reinvest back in other areas of the institution. In terms of the perils, we had to use a very collaborative, strong communication approach across our entire campus because there's a lot of concerns among the faculty that online education wasn't as high quality. There were also concerns that online education was going to replace the role of an instructor. There was worries about intellectual property. There were concerns that we would compete with ourselves online versus face-to-face, and many, many others. And so we had to roll out a very thoughtful engagement approach where we brought faculty and staff together and talked with them about their concerns and worked collaboratively to figure out what programs made the most sense to start, with the idea that nobody who didn't want to teach online, or that programs that weren't ready to put their programs online wouldn't have to. And as it turns out, when we started, we had a handful of programs that were ready to go first, and we went with them. And now many, many more programs and many, many more faculty are interested in doing so. There are perils, and a lot of it is that institutions typically need to put a lot more effort into developing their faculty members just so that they can feel strong and competent in teaching that way. But I do believe that it's important. It won't be the only way to deliver to education, but it will be an important part of how education is delivered to offer the flexibility and accessibility to college that many of CU Denver students will need going forward.
Thank you for that. Next question, describe how you would approach fundraising for our campus. How would you coordinate and cooperate with efforts at the CU system level?
I have done a lot of fundraising at my home institution, some with private donors, but in other cases had very good luck working with employers and foundations that share our same values and that have mutual interests in developing strong talent, and not just strong talent, but a diverse talent pipeline. And I would be very excited to get to know the region, both including alumni, and find ways to engage alumni around their connectedness and sense of belonging with CU Denver, recognizing that it's a relatively young alumni group, but also not only knowing that not relying on alumni would be too limited of an approach, and to get out there and get the word out and find ways to get people excited about the work that's being done and the research that's being done. I would be thrilled to collaborate with the system and with other sister schools at the University of Colorado, and I would also look forward to building friends. The first part of fundraising is building a community of people that care a lot about the institution, and so being out there as the biggest cheerleader and telling the story of the successes, but also the story of the vision and the direction of the institution going forward.
Fantastic, thank you. Just a kind of timing reminder, so we're halfway through the preset questions for Q&A. Don't forget that the chat box is open and available, so if participants would like to get additional questions in, you probably have about 10 more minutes before we transition to those questions. All right, Dr. Marks, so next question. Universities across the nation are reporting a mental health crisis on campuses. What are your prior experiences in dealing with this, and what do you see as ways to support students in this regard?
It is true that universities are having a wave of increased need for mental health services. We've felt that same trend on our campus and have had to make investments in adding more counselors and more services because lines are long. It could be because that people are feeling less of a stigma and more willing to come forward. I think there's also, at least from what I understand from the briefings that I've received from our leaders in this space at my university and from my general reading, that there are a lot of students coming to us from high schools who have lots of challenges, including anxiety and other things. In fact, we just got a briefing a few weeks ago in our cabinet meeting by the woman who runs our mental health center, and she gave some staggering statistics, like 1/3 of students at universities have thought about committing suicide. These are real numbers. They're very scary. As campuses, we do need to commit to making investments to serving our students in these ways. I think on top of the mental health investments, it's also important in the student affairs arena that we think about the student engagement activities and a focus on well-being, whether they're in curricular efforts or co-curricular efforts. By the way, this goes for faculty and staff as well, but I'm a big proponent of supporting healthy work environment, a healthy school environment, and I think we need a dual focus, one on supporting what is absolutely a trend of increased mental illness and challenges, and two is a focus on ways to improve well-being.
Wonderful, thank you. So next question. What is your experience working with shared governance? So for us, that includes faculty assembly, staff council, and student government association. So what is your experience working with shared governance groups? And what role do you envision that these shared governance groups would have under your leadership?
I have a lot of experience. We call it faculty senate, staff senate, and we have student governance, student government at my institution, and I work regularly with all of those groups. Shared governance is a very important component of how a university and institutions work. It is important to bring all voices to the table, decisions when it has to do with decisions that impact the institution moving forward. I got a chance to speak with representatives from each of those bodies yesterday, and I asked them the question of how are things working, and it sounds to me like things are that at CU Denver there is a voice and shared governance is working, and if things are working, I would plan to continue what's working. If there was additional need to have more voice in more places or different ways, I would be completely open to that, recognizing that we move forward as a community.
Thank you. So next question. Please share a time in your career where you made a significant mistake as a leader, as well as how you used that as an opportunity to learn and grow.
Oh, so many mistakes. Well, okay. A previous president had a big idea at my institution. This was 5 years ago or longer, but he wanted to change the name and focus of an academic unit. And his idea was he wanted to position this unit to resonate with donors. He knew some big donors. He wanted to position it more visibly to an external community. And this unit had it had 15 or 20 faculty members that were in it, and it had a long history at the institution. And it was the identity. The faculty members that were in this unit really had an identity with this unit. And his process was quick and not very inclusive, and I was asked, and the faculty, there was a lot of unrest within the faculty at that time, and I was asked to step in and help the situation. And after talking with the faculty, I just sided with the longtime faculty and actually convinced the president at the time that I didn't think his idea was viable, that I didn't think it would work, and that the downside of creating that much faculty unhappiness wasn't worth it. And I think I was wrong. Right now, today, the unit hums along. It's pretty much the same unit. They haven't received any external funding. They're not visible to the outside. A couple of faculty members that were behind this big idea have founded a different unit and are very successful elsewhere, receiving lots of funding and doing important things. And while I think he was right, I think his method was wrong of moving through this quickly and without sufficient engagement and buy-in. And what I should have done, as I look back on it, is found a way to be a stronger advocate for not changing the, not making the decision, not making a different decision, but lengthening the decision process to get a greater amount of engagement and buy-in from the faculty. I think we could have done it, and we could have had a win-win situation, and it would have been better positioned if I had done just that. So, you know, a lesson in that, not all change is good change, but just because something's hard isn't a reason not to do it. And this was a case where something I thought it was too hard, and so not do it. And what I should have done is advocate for changing the process of doing it and engaging early and often.
Okay, thank you. So next question, please describe what diversity, equity, and inclusion means to you. What actions have you taken in your current role to embrace this?
Sure. Well, I mean, a bit of context, you know, that I think we all know that the low-income students and students of color, and by the way, diversity is much broader than that, but with those groups in particular, they're just now enrolling at the same rate that high-income students did 40 years ago, and many of those students carry excessive debt. Many of those students default on their loans. It's a big national challenge that we have today, and we have it in Colorado. The bachelor's degree attainment rate among Black adults is just over half that of white adults, and the rate among Latino adults is even lower than that. And students from high-income families are approximately 5 times as likely as students from low-income families to get a bachelor's degree. I mean, these disparities result in far too many low-income people and people of color being denied their vision of the American dream, which includes upward mobility. And as communities and states and employers also, they're being denied the talent and the diverse workforce that they so desperately need to compete in this economy. And I see this is where institutions like CU Denver can change this. Demographics are shifting, our nation is diversifying, our higher education institutions need to reflect this diversity, not just with students, but with our faculty, our staff, our administrators, because our students today are tomorrow's workforce, they're tomorrow's leaders. And we have to focus on getting more of these students not only into college, but through college. Having a diverse student body, though, means it doesn't mean that so from an equity, that's how I feel from an equity standpoint and from a social justice standpoint. From a diversity standpoint, just because you have a diverse student body, it doesn't mean that you've won the battle. It's important to have faculty and staff who look like the student body. Students feel more comfortable if they're taught by faculty and served by staff that look like them and that can be role models for them. As far as inclusivity goes, I think there is no better place than a public university to bring together differences, who people are and where they came from. I mean, we should be a marketplace of ideas to learn about each other, to provide different groups like the LGBTQ community, like racial and ethnic groups, like gender, like veteran status, like international students, like people with mental and physical disabilities, students of different ages, different intellectual perspectives, political perspectives. This type of, creating an environment, an inclusive environment, becomes an incredible learning experience in knowing about each other's histories and cultures and lives and how that enriches the academic experience. And the university is the training ground for strong civic engagement. I mean, it happens in many ways, as you know, in the classroom. It can happen in advocacy that we're seeing more of in student organizations. It can happen in protests, activism is a very important way that this happens on our campuses, and I believe that needs to be supported. As long as while we're keeping our campus safe, we need to support activism and stay focused on freedom of expression. And administrators need to listen to students and help students make visible gains. We have to be open to supporting activism, but also to really hearing what their concerns are. And again, my own experience, I mean, we've had a number of these issues come up. I can speak to sexual violence prevention in specific. I mean, we've been listening to our students we've had multiple incidents where they've protested on campus, walked into the president's suite. We've sat down with them, have listened to their concerns, and we've acted on them when we can. We've also, I've mentioned this a couple of other times in some of my meetings earlier, but I want to share one more piece with you in terms of symbolism and what I feel is the importance of using symbolism to show our commitment to diversity and inclusiveness and even conflicting perspectives. We have a statue of George Mason University on our campus. George Mason was a founding father of our country and a slaveholder. And the statue is loved by students, and I was mentioning that students kiss his toe before they graduate. It's a tradition. But a lot of universities in America, especially on the East Coast, are taking down statues and erasing history with. And our students came forward and they worked with our faculty with an idea that we keep the statue, but we also build a memorial to the enslaved people of George Mason on our most premier campus plaza. And so it's going in right now, and we're going to have the George Mason statue, a tribute to his slaves, the lives they led, and put students and faculty and staff and visitors to campus in the uncomfortable but important feeling of how we wrestle with what is oftentimes a complicated truth.
Thank you for that example. So we are at our last question before online. It's a little long, so I'm going to read it all together, and then if you'd like, I can kind of parse it apart.
Okay.
In what ways do you see student affairs functions contributing to the educational mission of the university? How has the student affairs function optimized the student journey in your experience, and where has it fallen short?
Okay, so student affairs, how has it worked? How has it optimized the student journey, and where has it fallen short? Well, I work very, very closely with our vice president for student affairs at my current institution, and I have a lot of experience. She and I are terrific collaborators, and I believe that academic and student affairs need to work arm in arm to support the whole student that comes to college. For student affairs in particular, especially when you have such a richly diverse student body, you have students who have different needs. And so, so number one, all of the different services that can be provided that support veterans or support American Indians or support students of color, and many, many others are absolutely critical to making all students feel like they belong on campus. There's nothing more important than a feeling of belongingness to support student success, and student affairs has an absolutely critical role in helping to drive that feeling of belongingness. They also help students get engaged on campus, and in talking with some of you all in the past, actually with the student leadership, I asked them, what do you see as the greatest challenge? And they said, we have so many commuter students, and we're working on student engagement. And I do think that strengthening student affairs, student engagement is one of the primary opportunities and also challenges, especially with a commuter campus. And it's something that I think that CU Denver could do, even more of as things move into the future. Optimizing, we have had a culture where academic advising is done by academic advisors, and yet so many student affairs professionals are working with students, and they're the ones that students are actually talking with on a day in and day out basis. And so we have recently, and there's been some conflict between academic and student affairs in not necessarily recognizing that students really don't care who they're talking to. They want help with what they need help with. And so our student affairs leader and myself, a number of years ago, talked about our vision for what if we had holistic student support and didn't define by the type of professional you were, but sort of trained everyone to be more of a holistic supporter of students. And we're now unfolding that model on campus. I'm very excited to see how it does. But in terms of some of the limitations around student affairs that you've asked, I think the power of what student affairs can do is incredible, and the professionalism they have is incredible. They haven't always been given all of the right tools or access to all of the elements of how one supports students, and I think that more that we can think as a whole community, the stronger we can support students.
Thank you. So we're going to end the Q&A session by moving into questions submitted through chat. And so our first question that came in, can you share your thinking about online program management as a pathway for digital education at CU Denver?
Yes, and we made the choice at George Mason University to use an outside company, an online program manager, to help us stand up our online programs. What that means is that we hired a company to do digital marketing and to help do some of the enrollment processing functions for us, and to help give our faculty some of the development to help them put courses online. In the way that we've set it up, we've retained full academic control, and faculty own their IP. The university and faculty own IP, and all academic decisions in terms of what it takes to get in programs and graduation requirements are made by the institution. It's worked very well for us. We've been successful with that. One of the things that we recognized is to really do well in the online space, it requires two things. One is expertise in some of those areas that we didn't have, like digital marketing. Our university didn't spend very much on marketing, especially digital marketing. And two, and that's how students shop for programs is through digital space. And then two, there's a capital investment that's needed, a real significant capital investment that's needed to put programs online in quality ways, and we just didn't have the money. So the partner enabled, they made the upfront capital investment, and for us it's working out well. I learned how other universities have done it, and there's success stories out there. There's also stories of universities that haven't succeeded, and I would just say that if that's the choice that is made going forward, it has to be done in a very thoughtful, transparent way with risks and opportunities on the table for folks to understand and figure out.
Thank you. So next question. About 70% of all undergraduate instruction is taught by adjunct faculty who aren't being paid a living wage. In essence, our most vulnerable faculty are teaching our most vulnerable students. What would you do about this?
I can tell you what we did. We had the same issue, so I'll share what we did do, and I would love to, I don't know whether I'd want to do homework to understand exactly what has been done at CU Denver, but it worked very well. We formed a task force, an adjunct faculty task force, and with the principles of equity and fairness and well-being of all members of our community. And it was members of that task force included adjunct faculty, but also deans and other faculty members around the university. And we assessed, the first part of it was an assessment of the current landscape, what was happening with pay, and also in other things like parking and other quality of life issues for our adjuncts that taught a significant number of our courses and were very important parts of our teaching community. The result of this workforce had several recommendations that were pushed up to senior leadership that included number one, improving pay, but also reducing the cost of parking, putting more materials on websites that had information and resources that would be valuable for adjuncts, a dedicated orientation some mentorship opportunities, more inclusion in department and institutional events, a stronger feedback process. And we've been implementing them. I think we may have been implementing all of them as we can. And it was a great idea because it highlighted at the highest of levels the real issues in a very inclusive way, and we were committed to supporting them.
Thank you. Next question, so switching gears a little. Discuss how you will support faculty research initiatives. Identify 3 examples of specific programs or accomplishments in supporting faculty research.
I would be excited to support faculty research. We research, there's already a lot of exciting centers and work that's happening, and it would be fantastic not only to continue those efforts, but to find ways to expand those efforts and find new ways to bring on areas that are research, especially in partnership with employers and organizations in the region and beyond. Specific examples of work that I have done that has supported research. One in particular is, 3 examples. One in particular is we have a partnership with the Smithsonian Institution, and the Smithsonian had some land, and they bred, they had endangered species that they did research on how to breed endangered species in this space, and the Smithsonian scientists worked there, and they were working with some of our faculty members on research and also some of our doctoral students. And they wanted to formalize that arrangement so that the scientists could sit on dissertation committees and do collaborative research. As it turns out, and it took a few years in the making, and I got to be a big part of this partnership, but we forged what is now the School of the SMSC, Smithsonian Mason Conservation, the School of Smithsonian Mason School of Conservation Studies. And our university built a dorm, their institution built a teaching classroom building. And so not only do we have massive research collaboration, but we actually have a sort of a study abroad, meaning go an hour west of our campus into the mountains and have a semester-long deep experiential learning experience where our students can be a part of the research that's going on at both the undergraduate and graduate level. So that's one very large partnership example that's been very successful. Two other examples as we've moved through strengthening our institution as we've gotten stronger as a research institution is faculty workload guidance and P&T process. And I think I'll mention those because it's important to think about how the P&T process and how faculty workload guidance supports the ability to have a growing research and scholarly community. And I would, again, I don't know where you're at, but I've personally been involved in ensuring that our faculty support systems and policies make ample time and space for research members to engage for faculty members to engage in their research.
We are at 2 minutes for questions. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to ask Dr. Marks to make some concluding remarks. So last question, again, coming through chat. I'm going to read it as they submitted it. I was very interested to read about your success in increasing international enrollments at George Mason via conversion of a campus hotel into an international center. Based on your current knowledge of CU Denver, do you see similar opportunities at this campus? What strategies can CU Denver leverage to increase international enrollments?
I'm so glad that question was asked, and I should have mentioned it earlier, but yes, you know, a big part of having a diverse environment is having cultural diversity and internationally culturally diverse students. I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, a couple presidents ago, we had built a hotel on campus, and that whole hotel was not succeeding. It was losing revenue, and we tried to make it work but couldn't. And so I and a couple of others were asked to figure out how to repurpose that hotel, which is not an easy task. But as it turns out, we were able to form a partnership with a company that recruits international students. They're a company that's based in the UK but has offices in many countries around the world. And at the time, we had like 1 or 2 people in our international recruitment office, so we had a very limited capability to recruit internationally. And so we actually converted this hotel into an international center. The program space has become the area where students, both undergraduate and graduate international students, do their first year. They learn English, they speak English, but they don't speak it well enough to matriculate directly into the university, so they take English language classes as well as some first year program courses, mainstreamed with other students. The hotel rooms are now a living learning center where we pair international students with domestic students, and that's worked out beautifully. And it's another venture that we've doubled our international enrollment over the last 7 years. And so it's yet another initiative that has been strategically mission-centric and yet also supported the growth of bringing in new revenues for the institution. And so it was a win-win. It's just an incredibly exciting place to be on campus. And who knows what's going to happen. In international student enrollment, it's a little bit of a tricky time right now with everything that we're experiencing. But I do think the more that we can diversify our strategies, that these difficult periods will be short-lived, and we'll get back on track. For the University of Colorado and for CU Denver, I see this as a big opportunity. I have spoken with others about the fact that I see it as an opportunity, and it may be an opportunity to work collectively within the system, but also to have CU Denver take the lead.
Wonderful, thank you. In a minute, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Marks for some closing remarks, and then we'll take a couple of minutes to just close out some logistics. So Dr. Marks, would you like to provide some closing remarks?
Oh, sure. Well, it was wonderful to get the chance to talk with you. I wish I could see you all. I think during these times of uncertainty, it feels to me like keeping a clear pulse on the campus climate is so vital, and if I were to come in as Chancellor, I would promote first and foremost an environment of equity and inclusion where students and faculty and staff feel that they belong and where everybody can thrive. I would be honored to be the biggest cheerleader and a supporter of all of your accomplishments to date, and to also take stock of where you are today and to work with all of you in partnership to continue to advance your mission and to ensure the integrity and also the vitality of CU Denver into the future. And I'm so appreciative of all of the hospitality that I've been shown and the flexibility that you've provided to me today. And I hope that you all stay safe, and I hope to have the chance to continue the conversation.
Thank you. So please join me in thanking Dr. Marks for her time and for providing such thoughtful responses to our community's questions. A few notes. So each forum has been recorded and will be available. So Dr. Marks will be available after 5 p.m. today. You can refer to the email you received on Wednesday, March 18th for a link to that. Or if you just go to ucdenver.edu, at the bottom there's a link to both of the candidate pages. There you'll not only find a link to the video, but you'll also, perhaps even more importantly, find a link to the survey. So please do provide feedback on our candidates. This will be helpful to inform the University of Colorado President Kennedy's decision. And a few other things, so comments from the surveys will be open through Sunday at 5 p.m. And we expect a decision from President Kennedy by the end of March. So do take the time to provide us that feedback. With that, thank you again for joining today's forum, and thank you, Dr. Marks, for your time this afternoon. And I hope you are well.
Thank you very much, Stephanie.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.